There are no roads or buildings in this wilderness area. No motorized or mechanized vehicles are allowed, including bicycles. They do, however, accept comment cards from visitors, and so I'm going to share with you a few of the comments that staff have received at the Bridger Wilderness area. Trails need to be wider so people can walk holding hands. Trails need to be reconstructed. Please avoid building trails that go uphill. Too many bugs and leeches and spiders. Please spray the wilderness to rid the area of these pests. Please pave the trails so that they can be snowplowed during the winter. Chairlifts need to be in some places so that we can get to the wonderful views without having to hike to them. The coyotes made too much noise last night and kept me awake. Please eradicate these annoying animals. A small deer came into my camp and stole my jar of pickles. Is there a way I can be reimbursed? Escalators would help on steep trail sections. A McDonald's would be nice at the trailhead. The places where trails do not exist are not well marked. And finally, too many rocks in the mountains. It's kind of funny, even when we're in a place where we probably should fully expect to be a little uncomfortable and inconvenienced, we're not necessarily very good at it. We avoid things that are unpleasant. Our bodies are, to some degree, wired this way. Our nervous systems trigger us to move away when we're hurt, when we're burned or cut, or to stop moving when our joints are starting to be strained and when it's painful. This is good. It keeps us from being hurt. We avoid pain, which makes sense, right? Who wants to be in pain? In fact, we sometimes try to avoid unpleasantness of any kind. Most of us tend to step back from conflict, to protect ourselves from grief, to try to shape the world around us to our liking, to turn in comment cards, to let the world know how they could be doing everything a little better, when you really should have a McDonald's at that trailhead. We look for our own comfort and our own safety. We fear the loss of our loved ones, of our own lives, of the things that make us, us. And we, at least those of us who are privileged in various ways to be able to do so, structure our lives and our societies so that we can be as comfortable and as safe as possible. Now hold on to that thought for a moment while we talk about this passage that I just read from the Gospel of John. I have to alert you that our Sunday morning readings don't always come in the order that they happen in the Bible. And so what happens just before this story today is what you'll actually be hearing next week. It's the Palm Sunday story. Jesus comes riding into Jerusalem. Everyone's shouting, Hosanna. There are all these rumors going around that Jesus, maybe he's a king. And even if he's not a king, even if we're not sure what he is, there's this story going around that he's just raised Lazarus from the dead. People are coming from all over to be healed and to see this Jesus guy and figure out who he is. So we get these Greeks who show up, and they want to see Jesus. So Andrew and Philip dutifully go and get Jesus, but instead of just going to sort of have a pleasant visit with these people and heal them or whatever it is that they've come to do, he immediately starts talking about death. His own death and the death of anyone who follows him. I think it's safe to say what they wanted to hear. I think they probably came to see Jesus, the comforting Jesus, the kind of Jesus that we see on Sunday school walls, cradling lambs, or patting children on the head. They came to be healed and whole and comfortable and safe. But Jesus tells them that in order for something to grow, something has to wither and fall to the ground. In order for something to live, something has to die. Jesus goes on talking about his own imminent death, which seems sort of obvious to us in hindsight, although none of his disciples really got it at that point. He's talking about his own death, but he's also talking about them. And he's telling them that what it really means to follow him, what it really means to see him, is something to do with dying. And when he says, "Very truly I tell you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains just a single grain. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. Those who love their life lose it. Those who hate their life in this world will keep it." I think he may just be talking to and about us as well. About what it means to follow Jesus. About what it means to see Jesus. We, in this sort of progressive type of church that we are, I think have a tendency to take these kind of passages and jump into something sort of practical and manageable, sort of put it in a box where we can analyze it and look at it. And I'm going to get to something a little more sort of smaller scale, but I do want to stop for a second and throw out a possibility. I wonder what might happen for us as individuals, for us as a church, for us as the family of God, if we allowed for the radical possibility that Jesus actually meant what he said. That the only way to save our lives is to lose them, to allow them to be turned entirely upside down, to even allow our own dying, and especially the death of ourselves, the death of self. What would that be like? I'm just going to let that sit with you, because I don't think it's particularly useful for me to preach at you about what that kind of following Jesus and seeing Jesus might look like for you. That kind of presto, changeo, your life is entirely different, is not the reality of how most of our faith journeys work. And it also usually doesn't happen because some minister stood in a pulpit and told you it should. But even if we're not going to have that kind of instant transformation, I think that change happens incrementally for us in the same way. Not through just sort of constantly progressing forward and things just getting better and better, but through withering and dying. And then through growth and life. And I'd like to suggest to you that this is, in fact, the way that we come to really see Jesus is not just through life, but through the death that comes before it. I've been thinking about this a lot lately in my own life. As a lot of you probably know, in the last 4 months I've had 2 seizures and dislocated my shoulder both times. And I've had seizures my whole life, but this is a new sort of thing where it's not controlled and things are very up in the air in a way that they have not been in in the past. And it's necessitated some pretty major changes in the way that I live my life. The physical pain and the practical issues around this are annoying. But the hardest thing about this process hasn't been the being in pain or the sort of process of physical recovery or even the bus riding, although the things about this that have been most difficult have been when I've realized that I can't do the things that have made up my vision of me for my entire life. When I realized that who I am has to change. When I realized that I may not ever be able to do things the way that I used to. That I may never be as quick as I have always been. That I may never be able to be as independent as I have always prided myself on being. And to heap indignity upon indignity, I have to tell you, I also have to tell people that this is going on with me. So everywhere that I go, I have to tell people that there's this possibility that I may lose consciousness and shake on the ground, and this is what you should do in the event that this happens. Which is, for somebody who is, to their core, a strong and independent person, I have to tell you this is not awesome. And it's not like I've made some big spiritual decision here to give up the life that I had and follow Jesus better by not being able to transport myself anywhere or be alone really ever. I just don't have an option. But what I realize in my better moments, in my moments where I let grace take hold, is that while I don't have a choice about the circumstances, I do have a choice about how I live in them. Parts of me are dying. That is the reality. I cannot do anything about it. But if I take the long view, I realize that new things are growing up in their place. I'm having glimmers of awareness that there may be other values more important than the ones that I have held my whole life that haven't had space to grow until something else withered. Speed is dying. But that death is leaving some space to clarify what happens in the limited time that I have. What priorities and purpose do I have when I can't move at warp speed? Efficiency is, to some degree, dying. But greater mindfulness and compassion are growing up in its place. My picture of myself as independently strong and capable of doing anything that I please, thank you very much, is dying. But a more vulnerable and, frankly, more honest me is being born in its place. Now, in no way should you get the idea that I am taking all of this with grace and patience, because I am not. My whole being wants to fight against the reality that parts of me that I have valued are dying, or deny it and just try to go on living exactly the way that I always have. My human nature wants to alternately curl up in fear or deny it and fight to the death and set up defenses around my own limitations and my own dependency and my own weakness, because these are not things that our society values. And they're certainly not the things that I have valued in myself. But ultimately, I do not believe that the call of Jesus Christ is to have unlimited capacity to do things, or to be entirely autonomous, or to be individually strong. In fact, I believe the call of Jesus to be the opposite, to recognize and embrace the reality that I cannot and do not, in fact, do life on my own, to die to the illusion that I can, so that I can be most fully part of the body to which we all belong. So what I want to say to you all in this sermon is not the thing that I have fully learned and embrace every day, but the thing that I have to keep saying to myself over and over and over every single day. Sometimes this life of ours is about taking the long view. The pain, the little deaths that we experience in this moment are not the forever picture. And this is what the season of Lent is really all about. It's a time in the church here when we acknowledge that our life is just not always comfortable and secure, and that is not the life that Jesus has for us. We recognize together the realities of uncertainty and loss and darkness, and we express together a need for each other and a need for God. We don't practice Lent because we believe that death is the ultimate word. We practice Lent because we believe that it's not. We embrace our fragility not because we've surrendered to death, but because we live always in hope that life is coming. Life is coming. Life is coming. And it's in that space, between death and the hope of life, that we really see Jesus. In the name of the Creator, and the Redeemer, and the Sustainer. Amen.